Do names have power?
No mortal has power over me.
Oh, but there's a power in words. If I can find the right one, if I can just know you.
None on earth has knowledge of us.
Then it's a good thing I'm here. Now I think they think humanoid female uses shapes and words to channel energy. Ah! 14! That's it, 14! The 14 stars of the Rexel planetary configuration. Creature, I name you. Carrier Knight.
In the fairy tale Rumpelstiltskin, the titular character is defeated once his actual name is revealed. Sorry for spoiling a 213-year-old story. This concept of knowing a true name and gaining power over that entity has been around since some of the earliest religions and theologies.
Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice.
It's showtime.
If you've ever had a slumber party, been on the internet, or had older siblings, in fact, if you were just a kid growing up, then you've probably come across the urban legend of Bloody Mary. And you've maybe even played the game Bloody Mary. This game is a mirror game where you're supposed to go into your bathroom, close the door, turn off all lights, except maybe have one lit candle, say the name Bloody Mary 3 times, and then you try to get out of the room or turn on the lights. If you're not quick enough, and if the ghost of Bloody Mary forms in the mirror next to you, well then she'll claw your eyes, or even kill you. Well, that's how I knew of the Bloody Mary ritual growing up. I've heard sometimes you have to say her name 13 to 100 times. Some rituals have you in complete darkness. Some rituals have you spin around and say her name, and then you try to light a candle after the 13th time to see if she blows it out or not. And there's other times where you just have to do the ritual precisely at midnight. There are a ton of different variations to the Bloody Mary ritual, mostly because it's said that this game started in the 70s when the internet wasn't a thing. So when you actually learned how to play the game, it was usually through friends or a sibling or even on the playground at school. And of course, people would give a ton of different ways to do the actual game. The Bloody Mary ritual is said to have evolved from an earlier mirror game that was played in colonial America. Young maidens would light a candle at midnight and would look into a mirror to see the face of their future lover. Or if things went bad, they would see the face of the Grim Reaper and he would murder them right there. So, you know, that's a good 50-50 chance. See your future lover or die a horrible death. There is no real conclusion on what the true version of the Bloody Mary ritual is. But is there a real Bloody Mary? I mean, after all, names are supposed to have power, so there has to be somebody that you're actually trying to summon, right? The first person who they think Bloody Mary is Queen Mary I of England. Mary Tudor was born on February 18, 1516, in the Greenwich Palace in London, England, to Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. Unfortunate for Mary, she wasn't born into the glamorous lifestyle that you think would come with being born into nobility. Her father, Henry VIII, is a very complicated king. And sadly for Mary, Henry VIII wanted a son to succeed him, and this wouldn't be an easy task. Henry VIII ended up marrying a total of 6 women: Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. There's even a famous saying to remember his wives in order: divorced, beheaded, dies, divorced, beheaded, survived. Mary was seen as a princess as a little kid. It wasn't until her father married Anne Boleyn where she was declared illegitimate and was denounced from a princess to being just a lady. Henry would divorce Catherine, marry Anne Boleyn, and then tear England away from the Catholic Church. There he would establish the Protestant Church of England instead. Unluckily for Anne Boleyn, she didn't give Henry the son he wanted. And so, well, he beheaded her. This is one of the reasons why he did it. And so Henry VIII would move on to wife number 3, Jane Seymour. And hey, Henry got the baby boy he's always wanted. And in we welcome Edward VI. And Edward would make daddy proud and would succeed him in his rule. However, Edward would only rule for 6 years and die at the age of 15 from tuberculosis. Before he died, Edward did try to pass down the crown to his Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey, but Mary was determined as ever. And so in she rode in 1553 an army into London to claim the throne that was rightfully hers. And there was a groundswell of support, and in we welcome Queen Mary I. And she would put Lady Jane Grey on the executioner's block. This would be the beginning of Queen Mary I's rule over England and Ireland, and unfortunately, this is also where she would get the nickname Bloody Mary. Mary wanted to move England back to the Catholic Church, and so she revived a law called Heretico Comburendo, which punished heretics, or aka Protestants, by burning them at the stake. Mary hoped that these executions by burning at the stake would be a short, sharp shock, and that they would encourage Protestants to return to the Catholic Church. From 1555 until her death in 1558, almost 300 heretics were burned at the stake under Mary's rule. Now, if you're sitting there thinking that's a little brutal and maybe a little too far, well, in Tudor England, bloody executions were far from the norm. Execution methods would range from beheading to boiling to being hanged, drawn and quartered. And in Queen Mary's eyes, death at the stake gave uncooperative heretics a taste of hellfire, offering them one final chance to recant and save their souls. The deaths of the Protestants would be recorded by John Foxe, and he would tell about all these killings in his 1563 book, The Actes and Monuments, or this book was also known as Foxe's Book of Martyrs. And unfortunately for Mary, this book would kind of shape her reign and her public image as queen. Mary only ruled for 5 years, and she would die at the age of 42 and sources vary on this, but some think it might have been uterine cancer, some think it might have been ovarian cysts, or some even think it was the influenza epidemic. We move on from England to Slovakia for our next potential Bloody Mary. In the early 17th century, in the village of Trenčín, or modern-day Slovakia, there are rumors swirling around that peasant girls looking for servant work are mysteriously disappearing in the Kaputo castle. Elizabeth Bathory, a powerful scion of a Hungarian family, called this castle home with her husband, Count Ferenc Nadasdy. Bathory was given this castle as a gift from the Nadasdy family. Their marriage would only last 29 years when Count Ferenc would die in 1604. And this is when rumors of the peasant girls dying in the Kaputo castle would start to become a lot more widespread and dramatic. Bathory is rumored to have killed up to 650 girls and women in her castle, and this is how she would get the nickname Blood Countess. If all these killings are true, well then that would make Elizabeth Bathory the most prolific serial killer of all time. All of her killings would take place between 1590 and 1610. Viewer discretion is advised, as I'm going to describe how Elizabeth Bathory would kill and torture her victims. Bathory would allegedly burn her victims with hot irons, beat them to death with clubs, stick needles under their fingernails, pour ice water over their bodies and then leave them to freeze outside in the cold, covered them in honey so that bugs could feast on their skin, sewed their lips together, and bit chunks of flesh from their faces and from their chest. Don't worry, it gets even better. As some witnesses claim that Bathory's favorite method of torture and killing would be using a pair of scissors. She would mutilate her victims' bodies and faces. She would use the scissors to cut off their hands, noses, and private parts. Sometimes Bathory would even use the scissors to slice open the skin between the fingers. And if anyone has ever had a paper cut, that is true evil. Now, if you're versed in the lore of Dracula and vampires, then you're probably aware of Bathory's next accusation because it's her most infamous one. And this accusation is what really gave her her nickname. Bathory would allegedly bathe in the blood of her young victims to maintain a youthful appearance. I mean, you gotta do anything for skincare routine, right? In 1609 or 1610, sources fluctuate on the actual year, Count Georgi Thurzo would make an investigation into Bathory. It's said that Thurzo's investigation only started when there were rumors that noble girls started to die inside the castle. They didn't care about the peasant girls dying, they only cared when nobility started to die. Thurzo ultimately charged Bathory and her cohorts with the death of up to 80 girls. It is rumored that one of the investigators did see a book by Bathory's bedside, which did have the name of all her victims, which totaled 650, but that book's only said to have been a rumor. All on trial were convicted, but it was only Bathory who would escape execution. Instead, she was confined to a room of the castle that only had slits for air and food. She survived for 3 years, but was found dead in August 1614. Now, why would Bathory be killing all of these girls? Why would she be murdering up to 650 servants in her castle? Well, that answer's a little complicated, because like Queen Mary I of England, Elizabeth Bathory's history may have been rewritten to fit a certain narrative in history. Some modern Hungarian scholars theorize that the case against Elizabeth Bathory may have been due to others' power and greed than out of sheer evil from Elizabeth herself. Allegedly, King Matthias, the one who ordered Thurzo to do the investigation into Elizabeth, may have owed Elizabeth's late husband, and then Elizabeth after he died, a sizable death that may have pushed him to try to incriminate Elizabeth. There is another theory from Dr. Bailey, who believes that Elizabeth Bathory may have been a religious subversive, a book printer, a book smuggler, and a radical feminist who used her vast wealth and castle home to educate vast numbers of young women and girls. Dr. Bailey claims that the 650 women, the alleged victims of Elizabeth Bathory, may have been disposed, teenaged, unmarriageable noblewomen. So what Elizabeth did is she took them into her castle, taught them how to read, educated them, and almost set up a sanctuary for them. She made an institute for these women. Once the girls were ready to leave, they would escape through the castle's tunnels, and then they would venture off into the world. It's sad to say, but if this theory is true, or even if the first theory is true about the debt, then Elizabeth Bathory was convicted of crimes she never committed. She was just trying to help people out, or she was made a villain for history to remember her as a Bloody Mary. A third candidate for Bloody Mary is Mary Worth. And Mary Worth is often regarded as the true Bloody Mary. There's one story that states that Mary Worth is a 19th century woman living just north of Chicago, and that she's a woman who kills slaves who have escaped the Underground Railroad. Another origin states that Mary Worth is a witch. She lived in a cabin in the forest, and she was an herbalist who would make tinctures and remedies for a local village, and the local villagers were very skeptical of Mary. These tensions wouldn't alleviate though, when one day young women of the village went missing. Mary would vehemently deny that she knew anything about the missing girls. And well, there wasn't anything to suggest the contrary, but there was one thing that kept the villagers suspicious. You see, on that day, Mary seemed a little more youthful than her usual haggard and elderly appearance. The third Mary Worth story states that she was a witch who was burned during the Salem witch trials. However, according to the History of Massachusetts organization's blog, which actually does have an official list of everybody who was accused and killed during the Salem witch trials, Mary Worth never appears on that list. There are tons of other Marys, but never a Mary Worth. The fourth and final Bloody Mary is said to be a Mary who killed herself after her baby died. There are others who say that she is the one actually responsible for the baby's death. As we can see, much like the ritual itself, the origins as to who Bloody Mary is varies wildly. And for me, I never thought Bloody Mary as an actual person. I always thought it was just a ghost you were summoning. I want to say that I had actually heard of all these stories by the time I was 12 or 13. And it wasn't the Elizabeth Bathory story that I heard later be for Bloody Mary. I mostly heard her associated with Dracula and vampires. And now that I'm saying it out loud, her name's not even Mary. Her name's Elizabeth. But let's assume that when you chant Bloody Mary, one of these Marys or Elizabeth is actually summoned. Why is it a mirror? Mirrors weren't even prominent objects in any of the stories. Well, reflective surfaces used to be used in divination rituals. Divination is the practice of seeking knowledge or insight into the future. Whether it was a body of water or mirrors, reflective surfaces were used to call upon spirits. One historical divination practice was catoptromancy. This was actually used in ancient Rome, and priests would use a mirror for divination. It is also said that mirrors may be portals from our world into other dimensions, gateways from the physical world to the spiritual world. It's also said that mirrors can actually trap souls. So, are you calling upon the spirit of Bloody Mary, or are you calling upon a trapped soul in the mirror? Is there an explanation as to why there is so much mystical history to mirrors? Why people see things in mirrors that maybe aren't actually there? Well, the answer to that is more straightforward than you think. It's our brains. In 2010, Italian psychologist Giovanni Caputo did a study in which he asked 50 people to enter a dimly lit room and look into a mirror for 10 minutes. Afterwards, he asked the 50 people what they saw. Of the 50 test subjects, 66% reported seeing huge deformations on their face, and 48% also saw fantastical and monstrous beings. Others described seeing the face of a parent, some of whom were deceased, the face of an animal, or the face of an old woman or child. Caputo calls this strange face illusion, and is said to be a consequence of our brain's facial recognition system misfiring, causing a dissociative identity effect. You see, our brains need to comprehend and understand our surroundings. Our brain loves to know what's always going on, and this can sometimes misfire, and sometimes this backfires on us. Due to our brains constantly trying to understand what's going on, it looks for connections and patterns. Sometimes this can lead to apophenia, or the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. We want to connect the dots even when the information or data are completely random or unrelated. One version of apophenia you're probably familiar with is pareidolia. Pareidolia is a brain phenomenon in which a person sees or hears something significant in a random image or pattern. We've all had pareidolia in our lives. Some famous examples are when people see Jesus in toast, the Rorschach ink blot test, that's an example of directed pareidolia, or even sometimes you see faces in clouds. There is another effect that also messes with our brains as well, known as the Troxler effect. The Troxler effect is when you stare at the same object for a prolonged period of time, and there comes a point when your brain adapts or gets used to unchanging stimuli. As a result, your neurons cancel the information out, and the image often appears blurry, faded, or distorted until you blink or look around. Now, pair pareidolia with the Troxler effect. Throw yourself into a bathroom that's pitch black or maybe dimly lit with a candle. Tell yourself you're about to perform a ritual to summon the ghost of Bloody Mary that may or may not kill you. And well, you have a pretty good answer as to why some people see Bloody Mary, or some people just see reflections that aren't there. Now, it doesn't mean it's possible to actually summon Bloody Mary. I mean, let's think about it. Chanting a name, using a candle, and speaking into a mirror does have roots in actual spiritual practices. And well, I actually have a Bloody Mary story myself. I have a couple Bloody Mary stories, but this is the one that always sticks out to me. It was the winter break of 2004. I'm over at my friend Evan's house, and he invited me, Lance, Nick, and Tanner over to play some Halo 2 on Xbox Live, and we had been gaming into the early morning. I probably got bored and asked the guys if they'd ever done Bloody Mary. You see, Evan was my friend who would usually go along with me on my paranormal adventures. He would be one of the guys always with me when I got a new scary book at the library, or he would go on the internet with me as we looked up urban myths and all those fun stuff on the internet. After some reluctance from Lance, Tanner, and Nick, we all huddled into the bathroom that was attached to the room that we were in. You see, we were actually in a secondary house and garage that was separate from the main house, so we could be as loud as we wanted. We huddled into the small bathroom that was attached to the living room. We closed the door, turned off all the lights, spun around 3 times, and chanted Bloody Mary. After we were done chanting and spinning around, we opened our eyes, looked into the mirror, and nothing happened, to me at least. However, Lance, Tanner, and Nick were a little scared, but I'm sure Evan and I were not making things any better. You see, it wasn't until the morning where things got a little creepy. The sleeping arrangement wasn't favorable for Lance, as we were all kind of stacked on top of each other, and he had to sleep right next to the bathroom door. It went Lance, Tanner, Nick, me, then Evan, and in the morning, Lance was visibly freaked out. He was visibly upset. He was backed into the corner, all huddled up with his blankets and wanted to go home. We asked him why, and he said all night he was kept awake by scratchings on the door and a woman asking him to open up the bathroom door. Does Bloody Mary exist? Well, historically we've had a couple Bloody Marys, but as we learned, they may have been misrepresented to fit a certain narrative for history. As for the Bloody Mary that gets summoned in the mirror, well, there's some pretty good evidence that says it's simply our brain playing tricks on us. I think there's only one way to find out. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. I guess you'll just have to do it on your own.